I want to welcome everybody who's joining us today. This is one of our fall 2022 pre-High Point Market presentations, which is in partnership with Sherwin-Williams. High Point is running October 22nd through the 26th, and we hope that you'll be able to join us. Today, Sue Wadden, the Director of Color Marketing for Sherwin-Williams, is presenting Evolving Color, and we're happy to have you joining us today. This will be CEU accredited, and that information will be sent out afterward. And if you have any questions, go ahead and add those to the Q&A tab that you see. If you have any other questions, I'm Kim Porter, the Senior Programming Manager for IMC, DesignOn HPMKT Market. And Sue, I'll turn it over to you.
All right. Well, hi, everybody. I'm excited to bring this brand new presentation to everyone. We've never done a forecast report like this. We always do a sort of a polished trend presentation, but this is an opportunity to talk about kind of the behind the scenes on where color has gone since 2020. So I hope you enjoy. This will probably be, I don't know, like half hour, 35-minute discussion. So I would love to open it up to questions at the end and feedback. So I'm going to break the presentation up into a couple of slides. First, talk about color trend forecasting. Designers love to sort of know the insights and the whys behind the whats. And so we'll talk about that and why we do this, forecasting in general. And then I'm going to break it into color families and talk about directional color and where things are moving into sort of the second half, hard to believe, second half of this decade. We launched our 2023 forecast and we're well into working on 24 and 25. So it's crazy to think about. It's been a tumultuous couple years and that's definitely affected color. Again, my name is Sue Wadden. I'm the Director of Color Marketing. I'm responsible for all things color related for the Sherwin-Williams brand, whether that is for designers or homeowners. I manage a team that has cross-functional responsibilities in color. So I work with our coatings division and our industrial wood flooring division, and then teams across the US, Europe, Latin America, and China. So our group really is many touch points on color, and we all get together to collaborate on where we think directional color is moving, and then in turn we bring that report to you. So starting off, for those familiar, our color mix forecast is our annual color trend presentation, and we've been doing that work for about 15 years. It's hard to believe, but the evolution of color is constant and ongoing, as everyone knows, and this color mix forecast is how we track that color. And it's a pretty comprehensive program. It's got sort of many arms and spokes to the wheel on color, and so we always love creating the forecast and putting all these pieces together. So I'm going to talk about methodology first. So generally speaking, color forecasting is defined as the practice of predicting colors and color stories that'll be trending in the near future. There's definitely many industry cycles. Automotive has a really long lead forecasting cycle. It's like 10 years, whereas something like interiors are much faster. So part of the puzzle piece of putting the color forecast together is sort of determining direction for long lead design trends as well as short term. From a methodology perspective, this is a practice that's existed almost since the early 1800s. We've found historical references from early Victorian days, where it was about color psychology, and really it was about the time that color science was really gaining momentum, and an understanding of how we perceive color was really in its infancy. And so the psychological impact of color was really starting to be talked about, early on in the 1800s. Now the practice obviously has evolved and gotten more sophisticated, in which it includes a lot more analysis. So companies look at data and analytics, they track metrics. So in combination with cultural associations, what's going on in art and design, forecast methodology, and data points, now that's sort of where generally forecasters grab their information from. And again, it's part of it is putting together a puzzle piece. So it's research, it's reading reports, it's kind of putting on your oracle hat, if you will, to kind of predict where colors are going based on these sort of threads and methodologies. And it's more difficult than it seems. We often evaluate lots of inputs on color. So whether it's other coatings manufacturers, it's fashion and industry people. CAUSE is one of our good partners, the Color Association of the United States. And they've been doing forecast work for the fashion industry for like 100 years. So it's always good to sort of gather a cross-functional look at color because it lends itself to a more credible report. We work really closely with designers and architects because we want to get this information in their hands so that in turn, they can influence their clients with, credible information and sources. Oftentimes an interior trend has a long cycle like Scandinavian modernism or minimalism or the Marie Kondo effect. But then there's shorter span influences like, neon signs or sort of kitschy and fast moving design trends that we talk about in sort of a micro level. So I'll break that down on a slide or two here in the future here. So again, color forecasting is about critical thinking, methodology, and creative interpretation. And we, again, look at multiple sources. So from the historical context, maybe as related to product design, where has a product been? Like what was the trend, say, in wood flooring? Where has it been? What have we seen? How are we tracking how that shifts into the future? We, again, analysis of our competition, what's going on with other coatings manufacturers, what's going on with similar industries, other sort of like-minded manufacturers, like where are their color trends coming? A little bit about psychology, what's going on in the moment. Obviously easy to relate to is coming out of COVID. How did we take that information of that shared experience and apply that to color and color evolutions? And then culturally, what's going on now? What's going to go on in the near future to influence where sort of the consumer mindset is going to be? As we're talking about recession and, what that might mean from an impact in North America, that's definitely going to impact color. And so our reaction to that, we want to be ahead of as specifiers. So we'll talk about that in the slides to come. So after we do lots of analysis, the methodology process takes us to the collaboration. And again, this is where we pull other information outside of our analysis. So trend reports, consumer surveys, product research. We go to trade shows, or when we are traveling or get to travel, we go to Europe to a lot of the design shows, and in Latin America, there's some great shows. As well as Asia, and just see what's going on in those industries and sort of track where the trends are going. And then that serves to help guide our decision on our forecast palettes. This slide I love because we talk about, the trend cycle and what this actually means from a life cycle perspective. So it really lays out where the mega, the macro, the micro, and the fad sort of lie. And again, mega trends. So we all know from coming out of, basically the housing crisis in 2008, we moved into this mega trend, which was minimalism. So it was, do less with more, McMansions were being phased out, people were losing their homes. And so there was this look towards this simplicity in living, which led to this, fervor over the idea of minimalism. And that lasted a long time, which led into the love affair with gray. That's really attributed in trend cycles to where gray came from. And it was really out of the housing crisis. Things were pretty serious for a lot of people. And so that economic uncertainty led to this sort of ambivalence in color. We had been done with Build or Beige. It was time to move into something new. And that's really, as a macro trend, where the gray thing came from. But then from a micro level, like a smaller life cycle, which is usually like 1 to 3 years, we saw the minimalism thing sort of morph into, I call it the Chip and Joanna effect, and where that farmhouse vibe here in North America really, really mainstreamed. And that cycle, it probably lasted, like maybe 4 to 5 years, but as a micro trend, it was like shiplap, right? I mean, nobody's talking about shiplap anymore, but there was a period of time where like we were talking about it in trend cycles and design, and then all of a sudden you'd go to the lumberyard and the price of that lap siding like quadrupled. It went from 10 cents a foot to $5 a foot, right? So that's how a micro trend can influence building materials in an impactful way. And then we can talk about the fad again, like the neon sign thing. My daughter's a teenager, and at last Christmas, 2 Christmases ago, she was insistent on getting these LED neon signs for her bedroom, and she plugged it in and proceeded to forget all about it. So again, often influenced by social media and the things that we see on Instagram and TikTok, and sort of in those fast moving cycles can often influence the fad. And this slide sort of lays out from an interiors perspective, or more of like the built environment, what these trend cycles are. So for us, interior design trends, they have a really nice timeline, in my opinion, 2 to 5 years, which allows us to talk about new stories, every other year, every other year, where we can lay out where things are going, what's happening in coastal design, where are we seeing bohemian modernism move, is maximalism a thing? And it's fun storytelling, and again, the immediate impact can be turned over to clients, in a fairly quick timeline. Whereas things like doors, millwork, flooring, appliances, those are really much longer cycles, like 10 to 15 years. Appliance companies like GE do not come out with a new color, but in, very, very slow cycles. So the impact on the trend world is much slower. And so you can kind of break down where these other cycles are, which I think is really interesting. But again, I enjoy this position in the interior design world with a much faster timeline, which again allows for, more interesting storytelling. So next, I'm going to go into our color reports, and I've broken down the key color family directions that we're going to really be focusing on as we move into 23 and 24, with kind of like the whys behind the whats, and where we've seen our forecast report sort of the colors rank throughout, which is, everyone's coming out with their color of the years this fall. So it's really, really interesting to see how we've all sort of lined up. So first and foremost, the red color family. Red is really gaining momentum. Since 2020, we've seen, I wouldn't say that it's like the key color, obviously, but we've seen this gaining interest. And we haven't really talked about reds since maybe the 90s. They would sway in and out, like terracotta is obviously mainstream. We had the millennial pink, and that sort of mainlined right in the last, in the 2000s, the teens. But again, reds are coming back with a fury, attributed to a couple of things. I think neutrals have been so minimalist for a long cycle that people are really interested in seeing color. The vibrancy is what's going to be interesting to watch. We're forecasting a richer, deeper oxidized red, where others are forecasting sort of a bold, expressive red. So I think what's the most important takeaway is that red as a color family is really going to just pop its head back. And I mean, for those that are on this call that have been around since the 90s or have been paying attention to design since the 90s, I mean, think about maroon dining rooms. Everybody had a maroon and green dining room. So its emphasis is going to regain some momentum. But since 2020, you can see in our sort of color plotting here, the warmer range of tones. So really like these earthy, oxidized, natural neutrals have been very important to balance the colors in our collections. But this is really where color has sat for us versus these cooler sort of blue undertone pinks. that would come in as sort of a palette cleanse, but really weren't the emphasis of these warmer reds. From a color direction, for 2023, this color in particular, carnelian and toile red, as well as our color of the year, red and point, are really beautiful. They're beautiful in combination together or independent. A couple of reasons why. They're very muted. Muted colors, again, we're kind of in like a serious time, obviously coming out of the pandemic, but with economic forces globally, what's going on sociopolitically, all around the globe. It's really, it's kind of a tough time for a lot of people. So colors reflect that. And so while we're seeking color, they're a little more subdued, and which makes them much more usable for interiors. Just in my opinion, they're more relatable to more people. So we're starting to see these colors applied on cabinets and fixtures, certainly in textiles and materials, and also wall colors, which is just, it's really good to see. I think we've needed this re-emphasis on color in interiors. It's just kind of like we're at a critical point that we need to talk about color. Our second group is orange. So again, from an impact on the color family perspective, since 2020, we've definitely seen oranges, but they're a little more about terracottas and less about sort of these yellow undertone oranges, which we think is going to change. So these apricot hues are also going to be important in 2023. So this direction where we're kind of moving is interesting. They're a little spicier in undertone, a little more bright and vibrant, citrusy almost. But again, it's a nice palette cleanse to all the neutrals. So I won't say that orange is going to mainstream. Maybe it will in some industries, like in commercial interiors. We're seeing a lot of information on this sort of apricot tones. And I think in a lot of ways, it's because it's such a good balancing color with neutrals like grays and browns and blues. So that'll be interesting to track. And, personally, it's one of my favorite colors. So I always enjoy seeing these up. Why is it a key color? Again, orange has global appeal, even though in its most saturated form, it's almost too bright for most people. But again, think terracottas. We see terracotta everywhere in nature, whether it's on, roof tiles or in pottery or, accessories. Terracotta is really almost considered a neutral. So it'll retain its relevancy into 2023 and 24. Obviously, our color of the year sort of sits between a terracotta and an orange. So we see this warmth and direction is really important. And we're going to continue to hear that. You're going to see in shelter pubs and across all sorts of trend forecasts talking about the warming up of neutrals. Because don't forget, in an uncertain time, colors that are warm are really reassuring. People find, I know it's a little bit of a cliche, but it's like a feeling of a hug when you sort of surround yourself with these warmer colors. And that helps, even though they can be energetic if they're really bright. There is this visceral reaction. People have an emotional reaction to those colors. And if it's the right tone, it really provides great comfort. Yellow is always kind of dips its toe into trend forecasts because it's a great way to balance out all the neutrals and sort of colors that we see in interiors. And we've been kind of like middle of the road since 2020. So we have lots of warm hues, almost sort of these like oxidized yellows. Metallics, gold metallics have been since 2020 certainly trending. They kind of replaced, nickel, polished nickel for a while as the metallic that we wanted to see. They're symbolic of joy and fervor and shine and luxury. So we love sort of where this like goldenrod hues are, but there's a lot of undertones of yellow greens emerging in trend worlds, in trend speaks and product design. So I think that's going to be an interesting color to track, sort of yellow with green undertones, almost chartreuse is really going to become important in interiors in like the seasons to come, probably more so in 2024. Color impact, yellow is associated with joy. It can be a polarizing color, but again, with the right muted undertone, It can act as a neutral. So, you know, it can look futurist, it can look artisan. It's really got a broad spectrum of usability. And so it's going to be fun to see where this sort of optimistic color goes in interiors. Greens, you know, I would go and probably say that greens have been the most important color in interiors for the last 5 years. Think about last year, every color of the year, including Sherwin's, was some form of green. What that meant is, out of our shared experience of COVID-19 and lockdown and all the things that that meant, everybody was seeking reassurance outside. And so green is, you know, the natural association with nature. So I think we all had our different point of view on where green was going. And that is going to continue to make green a really important color for the seasons to come. It's not just going to go away. But what I think the impact we're seeing now is the deep tones, the richness, the vibrancy. So in kitchen and bath, we're seeing green as a key color, as far as like even, you know, full kitchen cabinets painted in these sort of deep green tones, but also these blue tealy undertone greens have been really popular. So again, there's not too much in the sort of muted light tones, not, you know, minty greens have really, we talk about them in trend world, but they don't always sort of get adopted into interiors. Absolutely, these deeper, darker tones have. Where we see, you know, this was our color of the year for last year, Evergreen Fog, which again, almost acted like a cool neutral. But we had really great success with this color because it was so usable. So I think what we're excited about is the evolution of that nature conversation and where that's going into 23 and 24, and where green plays. But again, you know, obviously all of these themes are going to be super important moving into the next half of the decade. So a color family to watch and learn about for sure. Blues evolved. Blues were really, really important. You can see here in 2020, I mean, look at how many blues are in the forecast palette. So that was really like the defining color moving into this decade. And then we had a little pandemic and that changed things. And where blue was gaining momentum, we switched to green. Obviously that association was really strong with nature. Blue is always going to be important. I've read a couple recent reports where the, you know, kind of coastal vibes are shifting up a little bit. It's kind of like reinventing the coastal, like, you know, beach house look is going to be more bohemian, and blue and white is going to be another, you know, really important combination. So while blues never go away, they've sort of taken a backseat to green, which was really interesting. But always a fan favorite. You know, everybody loves blue in some shape or form. And this particular shade, these sort of muted, almost denim inspired blues, are going to be important in 23 and 24. So just of note. I'm going to touch lightly on purple. Purple doesn't ever seem to go away. It's not really my favorite. It's hard to use sometimes, purple is. But from the digital perspective, we've all heard conversations about the metaverse and the importance of, you know, where digital color is going to go. So I think that it's an important color family, but it's the way I'm seeing purple is almost like a jewel tone expression, like these really deep, again, blackberries and maroons and fig tones will be important again in kind of maximalist interiors, as well as these muted sort of softly mauve undertones of purple. Here's been some of our favorites. Again, this color carnelian, you know, make a note of it. I absolutely love it. It's so beautiful. And we show it in some of our marketing pieces that are tied to this year's color forecast. Just like a great usable color. And then we're going to move into warm neutrals. So I'm sure everybody has heard how neutrals are warming up. And I feel like, you know, we're there now. It's not just a trend that's coming. People are really embracing the idea of beige. And look, you can see, you know, there's not a lot of grays here. This is about creams and beiges and taupes. I wouldn't say khaki. We haven't seen a lot of khaki yet, though that may be coming in the second half of this decade as undertones are kind of going in the green direction, which is interesting. But for right now, we're sitting like in the beige universe. So again, really anchored brown undertones, really natural, again, tied to this conversation around natural neutrals. They go with everything. Warm neutrals are really well behaved, so they balance with cool colors and other warm colors. And so what I like the most is we'll talk about in a couple slides on where whites are going, and tinted whites. So again, this, warm neutrals are beautiful. It's about layering. So you can range from sort of cooler taupes through sort of this warm beige into lighter mushroom tones. And they all look really sophisticated and kind of layered together. They're stable, they're soothing, they can be structured. All these great sort of buzzwords fit well with warm neutrals, and will continue. Whites. So you think a white is a white is a white, and as designers, we know that is not true. What has been interesting is we had seen in 2020 this sort of emphasis on cooler whites, truer whites, bluer whites, whites that were a little icier, again, to go with all the gray that we had seen. And now the expression is warming up. So we're moving into this categorization of almost tinted whites. I wouldn't say cream, but like whites with a softer undertone. So we want to take the stark edge off white and soften it a little bit with yellow or a little pink or a little like warmer undertone, a little taupe, so that it almost looks like a mushroom white, like a tinted white. And there's a lot of emphasis on those colors in the next couple of seasons. So I like to say colors like bone, chalk, cream, mushroom, and those layered tones will come together almost in a monochromatic way to be the idea of this, clean reset. Like, let's try to shake off, a lot of the angst that we've carried into this simplistic, beautiful, structured, layered white canvas. So again, we all know what white stands for: clarity, purity, lightness, ethereal. Some interesting reports have been talking about pastels, which I don't like to say pastels for interiors because that sounds really like youthful and almost like childlike. We're talking about tints and shades. So tinted pinks and tinted blues and tinted greens that sort of live really light and ethereal, but they're balanced with a lot of also layered whites for a kind of like ethereal look, if you will. And then on the flip side of that are the deeper tones. And these are ones to really, really pay attention to. So like red, we haven't talked about brown since the early 2000s with brown and Tiffany blue, for those that remember. And I think this is interesting. You're going to continue to see the importance of the brown color family in many wide ranges. So from taupey, cooler undertone browns to really warm, oxidized browns. Brown is stability. Brown is earthiness. Brown is familiar. It's the color of, soil. Like we all get why brown has a relevancy, but it hasn't been an important color family, obviously, in a long time. So, something to keep your eyes out. Wood tones are sort of in that like walnut warm existence. It's not too like that driftwood thing is kind of gone, right? Those grays are gone. And it's really about this prevailing naturalness in wood tones. Again, I'm going to just show this color one more time. Here it is up on the wall. Even though it's got a strong red undertone, you definitely get the anchored, warmth of the wood. In 2021, our color of the year was urbane bronze. And again, this just really deep, dark bronze that was beautiful, and it was popular for both outside and inside. So again, you just get the stability of that color. And we're going to see browns range from, light, almost beige browns through terracotta into deep dark browns. And it's going to continue to grow. Natural materials, sustainable interiors, organic interiors. Brown is just a really important color. Or I should say color family, because it's got such a broad range. And then here's where we're talking about tints and shades. And again, not always appropriate for interiors, but when you see them together, there's just like a lightness and joy So we'll track, again, this sort of yellow-green undertone into interiors in 23 and 24. And again, this sort of muted expression. So it's not like the graphic. It's not always these bright tones. It can be these tints and shades that are much more approachable and usable in interiors. But again, sort of surfacing into the wellness space, the athletic space, into gyms. There's positivity and joy in these colors. You get a little digital influence as well from a mood and direction. And then finally, dark saturated tones. I think this is going to continue to be these deep tones, especially through the political climate and all the uncertainty and war and everything that's going on globally. That's where deep dark colors really sort of live in uncertain times. So we saw a lot of deep tones in the 90s when there was plenty of sort of socioeconomic upheaval. And again, we're going to start to see those mainstreaming as well. So it's not just about black and white. It's about really deep, dark, monochromatic interiors. And, maybe it's the office space. Maybe it's one room within a home, but this hue group has a pretty broad range. And you can see where it has been. Like, it's not been as prevalent as other color families, but definitely the iron ores, the charcoals, the deep navies, the deep greens, urbane bronze, like these all have had relevancy in interiors, and they're only going to continue in a more impactful way. If I can get to the last slide. Here we go. So again, some beautiful jewel tone deeps, like these deep, deep, deep teals, which look pretty incredible in interiors on sort of case goods and cabinetry and trim. Painting, reversing out trim with lighter walls and darker trim. That sort of look and feel is really starting to gain some momentum. So we're featuring words like gilded and celestial, and there's this glamour and mystery and intrigue. And again, we haven't really talked about deep, deep, deep hues in this way probably since, I don't know, 2013, maybe. So, continue to watch for these deeper colors as they sort of become what's new and next in 2023 and 24. So that is the end of the presentation. I would open it up before closing and talking about our booth at High Point. If anybody has any questions, if you have questions, you can send your questions to Kim. I'd be happy to answer. Or for those attending High Point, we're really, really excited. We haven't had like a big booth at High Point in a long, long, long time. And so if you're going to be there next week, please stop by our booth. There's information here. We're in the suites at Market Square. We're going to have some presentations. So I'm going to present our color mix forecast on Sunday, October 23rd at 11 a.m. and very excited about that. Always great to share our forecast. And then my good buddies, Shane and Sabina, are going to present on Monday in our seminar room on how do cultures influence color. So that's just a great presentation on cultural references of color. And if not, stop by. We've got designer tools and all sorts of things available. So we're excited to be at High Point in a big way next week, and can't wait to see everybody. And that's it. So thanks for your time.
We definitely want to thank you, Sue, and thank Sherwin-Williams for this presentation. I mean, it's amazing and a great overview of everything taking place. And if you need any other information or more information on what's taking place in our Sherwin-Williams Designer Lounge or the seminar room, you can visit our website, which is imchighpointmarket.com. Thank you, and we'll see you hopefully on site.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.